Now let's talk about integrating tools into this platform, and let's start off with a very simple tool, which is Wikipedia, which we've used before as well. Okay. Now the idea here is, if you don't, by the way, see this, go to Tools and then um, scroll down until you see Wikipedia. If you don't see that, then simply go to the Tool Marketplace and then just search up Wikipedia, click it, and then make sure you click Install. Okay. And that's it. Now, tools have actions associated with them. The action for Wikipedia, for example, is called Wikipedia Search. So this enables you to search things using Wikipedia. Some tools have multiple actions. For example, if you go to the email tool, you can see it has two actions. It can either send an email, very simple, or it can send an email to multiple recipients. Okay? So we'll be going through a lot of those things. But the one thing I want to go through in this video is when you have an action like Wikipedia search, it requires parameters. Okay, so it requires you to put in something as to what the query string should be in this case and the language of the results that you want to search. In email, it requires other things. So if I click email and click send email, it requires these things: recipient email, email subject, and email content. And then these three other things are just optional. So in summary, tools have actions, actions have parameters. Okay. So if I go to my apps here, let me delete my workflow app. So I'll create a new one. So click create from blank. And here we'll create a workflow called test tools. And we'll click workflow and then we'll click create. Okay. It goes to show here that if you use tools, so if I go over here, click the plus button, select tools, and then I select Wikipedia. Okay. I then see all the actions. So I'm going to select Wikipedia search. It makes sense that here you need to specify the parameters. So you need to specify what you want to search and the language as well. So in this case, I want to search for, let me search for Tesla, for example. Bad example. Tesla's not really liked anymore. Let's search for Porsche. I think that's how you spell Porsche. Okay. And then language, will type in English. Okay. Perfect. We then have output variables, which we'll get, which is the text, files, and JSON. All right. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll just end it and we'll put an output variable called research, and we'll set it equal to text from Wikipedia search. Okay. Now let's go ahead and run this flow and see how it works. So it's doing the Wikipedia search. Then we get to the end and the output is here, Porsche. Usually shortened to Porsche, is a German automobile manufacturer specializing in retail, blah, 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 blah. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. All right. Awesome. Now this is great because we're explicitly determining the parameters, and that's important here. When you use a tool in a workflow or a chat flow, you need to explicitly define the parameters. In this case, the parameters, again, are query string and language, but you need to specifically define them. The great thing about using an agent instead of using a workflow is that your parameters do not need to be explicitly defined. Here's an example. So here we've created this amazing workflow. It's great. It does a search for Porsche, then it gets us what we want. But now if we want to do a search for Ford or Tesla or something else, we won't be able to do that. What we'll need to do is go in and modify this and do it this way instead. But you might be thinking, Henry, what if we add an input variable? That's great. We can add an input variable, but it needs to be the exact query string, right? So I can, for example, create an input variable here, right? I'll create a new input field. I'll say query over here, query. Okay, and I'll make this equal to query instead, right? Perfect. Now this will work fine if, in this case, we have the exact query that we want. So if we say Tesla, for example, this will give us the exact output that we would want, which is great. Actually, this doesn't even give us, this gives us Nikola Tesla, not even the car version, which is kind of what we wanted before. But now, and especially if I go in and I don't put Tesla, but I put something like, you know, something completely different. I'll say something like compare Ford and Honda. It gives me something completely random like Red Bull power trainers, right? Because the actual search that it's doing is that it's doing it on compare Ford and Honda. We don't want it to do that. Instead, we want it to do, okay, search for Ford, then search for Honda, and then compare those two things and then give us the information. That's why in a workflow, you need to explicitly define your parameters. And sometimes that can go wrong if you're just transferring whatever the user input is. This is where agents are far superior because an agent is smart enough to be given access to the tool and then determine itself what the parameters should be. So now if I go here to my platform, let me just save this. Let me click here and I'll get rid of company research. I'll create a new agent from scratch. Test agent. Okay, perfect. And I'll give it some simple instructions like you are an AI assistant that does research and provides answers. Okay. In this case, we're going to give it the Wikipedia tool, the Wikipedia search action rather. And now I'm going to say here, compare Ford and Honda. All right. Now what it should do is it should do two Wikipedia searches, right? The first, it should, well, I clicked it by accident. It should query Ford, which it did. And then it queries Wikipedia again. And then it gives me the answer. So now it's smart enough to explicitly or implicitly determine what the parameters should be. If I go over here to the tracing, I can see exactly what it's doing. First, it's doing a Wikipedia search on Ford. You can see that query Ford. It is then doing a Wikipedia search on Honda. You can see that query Honda. And then finally, it's taking that and then passing it to an LLM. And then that's what gives us our final answer here. So it's smart enough to determine what the parameters should be based on the user input, which is why using tools and agents is so much better than using tools and workflows. In workflows, you need to explicitly define everything. In agents, you just say, hey, agent, here are the tools that you'd need. Go and do your thing. Give me the answer. And it's just a much better experience. Okay? Awesome. Okay, I think that's enough for this video. In the next video, we'll talk about combining multiple different tools together and seeing how agents are able to deal with that.